basically in every strip, there's Wonder Woman getting tied up.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sort of like BDSM adjacent imagery, not even adjacent. There's just a lot of imagery. And so because this was a comic for children, a lot of people objected. So the editor caught some heat from it.
That and so much more coming right up on today's episode of The Pod Spotter. You're listening to yet another riveting conversation on The Pod Spotter, you lucky dog. Have you seen the number of podcasts out there? Don't even look, okay? Just meet me here every Monday. I'll have a brand new podcast for you to slip on and try out before you drive it off the lot. And hopefully you find it useful and entertaining. And if you do, please tell people to follow our pod, subscribe and like, and do all the things that podcasts ask you to do. Word of mouth really helps. Visit thepodspotter.com and on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at thepodspotter for extra content and info on upcoming shows. Then, like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. It's really a pleasure. I've been screening hundreds of podcasts. Pack your lunch pod, people, because today we are going on a field trip. You remember the giddy excitement the night before grade school field trips, don't you? A whole day out of the classroom, unstructured learning, moderate supervision, and if everything goes according to plan, an afternoon culminating in a trip to the planetarium where you may or may not be so lucky to score a seat next to your crush who you realistically have no shot with because she only dates high school boys. I digress. I have found the podcast that bottles that entire experience and then some. So throw on your lanyard, leave all liquids at the door, and follow my tiny purple umbrella as I guide you through Sidedoor Podcast, where host Lizzie Peabody and senior producer Justin O'Neill sneak listeners through the Smithsonian Sidedoor for stories that the other tour guides aren't going to tell you about. There are over 154 million treasures that fill the vaults of the Smithsonian. But where that tiny placard you're really just pretending to read ends, Sidedoor Podcast opens your mind to the stories behind the exhibits with the help of biologists, artists, historians, archaeologists, zookeepers, and astrophysicists. Joining me today to discuss all things Sidedoor related at the Smithsonian is the aforementioned Lizzie and Justin. Thank you for being here, guys, and thank you for sharing the pod with us today. How are you?
That was a heck of an intro.
You really know museums, Zach.
Been a couple. I think I hit all the stereotypes.
Yeah, I think you got them.
Lizzie, how would you introduce yourself on a tour at the Smithsonian?
I'm Lizzie Peabody. I'm the host of the Sidedoor podcast and one of the producers.
I'm Justin O'Neill. I'm senior producer on Sidedoor, and I'm not the host.
But do you find all the artifacts that you feature? Do you find all of the exhibits? Are you in charge of, like, is this podcast just full of things that you love at the Smithsonian?
For both of us, I think so, yeah. Like Lizzie and I, we have a pretty sort of egalitarian role in finding stories, and usually we kind of do this sniff test together. Is this a thing? Is this not a thing? Then we kind of dive right in and go ahead.
And Lizzie, how do you describe Sidedoor to folks who haven't heard it yet?
I describe it as the podcast that sneaks you through the side door of the Smithsonian, where we can share stories that might otherwise escape notice on a trip to the National Mall, especially because we can share stories from research institutions and really, the vaults where a visitor from the public doesn't get to go. So it's really special access. And, you spoke about the placards that you're only pretending to read. I feel like on any given trip to a museum, there's a finite amount of attention you have for that format of taking in stories and taking in information. So the audio format really enables us to share a lot of the more sound-rich resources that the Smithsonian has, which are more challenging to put into exhibitions.
I don't retain any of that. I'm looking at the date. I'm like, okay, 1923. That's when. Okay, and there's no time to. You're not absorbing anything. But if I was able to walk through the Smithsonian and listen to your podcast, not like so, it'd be sort of better than a guided tour a little bit. Like if when I came to a piece and they were like, here, check out this 20-minute episode of Lizzie and Justin. Like I would have learned so much more as a kid if I had this resource. Is that possible for the future of this pod? That the life of this exists for people to walk through the Smithsonian and listen to you guys?
So much of the Smithsonian, though, does, as Lizzie was just saying, does live sort of beyond the museum. That, like, they call it the world's largest, museum complex and research institution. So, there's like think tanks and archives and vaults and there's a whole unit down in Panama. Like there's just so much more to the Smithsonian than I think most people would even imagine. Mm-hmm. So, and that's sort of our job. And in the before times, pre-COVID, one way I would sort of imagine a story or look for a story would be to kind of just say like, okay, like where can we get this week? Or what's the neatest experience? And so that's kind of how we ended up, behind the scenes with orangutans or holding the Hope Diamond replica or, that type of thing.
I think that like audio tours, that is sort of the point of them. And I think if you were listening to episodes of Sidedoor as you walked through a museum, it would take you like a year to get through one wing because they're so long. So I don't know. I think the value of it is that you can hear it from anywhere and that then you can look up the thing online, or the next time you go to the Smithsonian, you'll like beeline it for that thing that you know the story of. So I don't think it has to happen at a museum. I think the beauty of it is that it can be consumed on the metro or like doing anything mundane in your day-to-day life. Laundry.
This is the only way to consume the Smithsonian right now, right? You kind of alluded to that, Justin. Everything's been locked down, is locked down for the foreseeable future, but you have COVID-proofed yourselves. This is the only way folks, though, can enjoy the Smithsonian right now, through you.
Hopefully not for long, but...
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of mentioned it, but the brick and mortar is like 19 buildings, but the Smithsonian, you said, it's really a collective of people and research.
Even within sort of those museums, like there's a orchestra, the Jazz Masterworks Orchestra. There's just like it's like a university a little bit in that it sort of has like all of these kind of colleges that are theoretically like they're sort of independent little fiefdoms, but they're also a world unto themselves.
I just learned yesterday that we have a doctor, a Smithsonian doctor, whose job is to like take care of Smithsonian employees and also warn us about, all sorts of important medical stuff. It's kind of like having a school nurse, but we have like a Smithsonian doctor.
Wow. Does that doctor collect like physician artifacts too on the side? Like weird Mutter Museum things? No, just takes care of people.
We could never compete with the Mutter Museum.
Oh, Mutter Museum. So fun. If anyone hasn't been in Philadelphia, it's just like drawers of things that they'd taken out of kids' mouths over the years. Well, talk about the Hope Diamond then. Talk about being close to the Hope Diamond. Were you able to hold it? Was that a white glove experience?
Replica was the word I slid there at the end.
Okay,
yeah.
Got it.
This was also in the before times in another way, in that it was before Lizzie. So I feel like I'm talking about like
Dark Ages
or something
with
fine. My current partner, but it's
it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, earmuffs.
Taking off my headphones.
This was the season premiere of the second season that of Sidedoor, the second like full season of Sidedoor, and we just decided like what's the splashiest kind of most exciting thing that we could kind of bring the public to, and one of the places was the Gem Vault, which is like, if you're a bank robber or something, this place is pretty ripe, but it's also behind like all of these doors and beeps and passes and swipe things and like heavy metal, and it, and then we walked in and it was sort of like this glowing like room filled with like very fancy rocks, and one of them was this like in a vault inside the vault.
Wow.
Was this replica of the Hope Diamond, which was sort of scientifically made, and the Hope Diamond has been cut down 3 separate times from like a hefty kind of, a stone you'd hold like in the palm of your hand, and now it's more like something you'd hold kind of with 3 fingers, and it's sort of scientifically accurate, so they can sort of study the properties of the Hope Diamond without really disturbing the Hope Diamond. So we were able to kind of slip on some white gloves and hold these stones, and they're still worth like hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Do they pipe in music from the Titanic as you approach that inner vault?
I just hummed it to myself.
You
really.
can't not. You can't.
Yeah,
not.
exactly.
It's just Celine Dion on loop. Yeah.
I love it.
Well, that's just in my head anyway.
Always. It's your resting state.
Yeah.
How many Hope Diamond replicas are there?
To my memory, there are 3, just because it's been cut down a few different times.
You mean the originals? The replicas haven't been cut down. The original's been cut down?
The original has been cut down, yeah, because it's been this stone that's sort of been possessed for, centuries. It came from India as this very large stone, and then it was brought to France, where it was cut down and sort of built into a necklace for, I believe, Marie Antoinette. And so it was like this big, raw, ridiculous thing. And then so they had to make it into like something that they could put into a piece of jewelry. And so that was one time it was cut down, and then it was stolen. It was apparently held in like a very poorly guarded vault. And which was just like absolutely looted and robbed blind over like the span of several days. And then they cut it down to sort of conceal the diamond's identity, and then it popped up in England, half a century later. The host of the show at the time was an enthusiastic young man named Tony Cohn.
Yeah, Tony's great.
Let's have a listen.
Back at the National Museum of Natural History, National Mineral Collection curator Jeff Post took us into his very secure gem vault. It's behind 5 layers of security, including one door that has a hand scanner on it.
And this is an area that's restricted to only 4 of us in the building.
Once we were securely in the vault, and it literally looks like a bank vault, Post pulled out the replicas he had made to show what the diamond would have looked like at different stages of its existence.
And so I'm opening a couple boxes here that show you some of the replicas we've been able to make using historical information. There are some drawings that were done of the diamond back when it was sold to King Louis XIV.
When Louis XIV bought the blue diamonds from Tavernier, it was huge. 112 and 3/16 carats. That's more than twice the size that it is today.
You can see it's kind of a flat stone, a little bit triangular shaped, but that's how King Louis XIV would have first seen the stone.
What's your relationship with those early episodes, Lizzie? Can you listen to them? Pre-Lizzie?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You still...
Can I listen?
Yeah.
They fill me with rage and jealousy. Yeah.
You came
Jealousy,
to this.
No, I can listen.
Your background was in education, right? Pre
Right.
this, so you come from that side of it. What did the teacher experience coming to museums as the teacher? How's that job informed the host?
What I took from teaching was how important storytelling is to learning and to understanding. So I used storytelling a lot in the classroom to get and keep my students' attention, which is all about the subtle art of manipulation, making them think they want to pay attention to the things that you want them to pay attention to. And storytelling was a really valuable tool in that regard. So I feel like I got my start as sort of a storyteller in the classroom. And so to be able to essentially be a professional storyteller, but for an educational purpose is like such a dream job for me, because essentially we are a teacher. The goal is to impart knowledge and share information more widely, but through stories that will entertain and stick with people.
I think that's to my earlier point. Like I'm just an individual that learns better through a narrative, through the narrative storytelling. Like I have learned more from your podcast than I could ever just from these bullet point facts. And so I think it's just an incredible resource, what you guys are doing. And everyone should like and subscribe and follow and do all the things that you do for Side Door. We continue our tour right this way of the Smithsonian Sidedoor podcast. You'll notice a silver and black video game cartridge with a little dirt left on it.
There's these huge machines that are super loud, and they have these giant claws and all these, excavating equipment and super drills and just this giant stuff, and there's loud machinery. There's all these piles of dirt that have been brought up with garbage in them and detritus, because it was a dump that has, decades of dump.
After 6 hours of digging through 3 decades worth of trash,
out comes an ET cartridge, a kind of crushed, very damaged ET cartridge.
So who is Howard Scott Warshaw, and why is an ET cartridge part of the Smithsonian Collective?
Howard Scott Warshaw is the creator of the ET video game by Atari. He wrote that game when he was in his 20s, like a young punk right out of school. And as an older man now, he's seen the rise and fall of Atari, which is basically attributed to this video game. So that the story is Atari made many good games, and then they made a really terrible game, and it was so bad that it sunk the whole company. That's the myth, and that they were so embarrassed by it that they buried the cartridges in the desert. And nobody really thought, like,
Why
including...
is that the solve there? Why just bury them? What?
Well, you have to listen to the episode to figure out why that actually, what happened. I can tell you if you want.
You gotta hide. You gotta bury your shame. Got it.
Bury your shame.
Like a body in the desert.
Exactly.
It's like a coding Breaking Bad. It's like a nerd Breaking Bad. So they bury 14 million copies of ET in the desert. And I kind of vaguely remember this doc from a couple of years ago. Probably watched it some night I couldn't sleep, and I do remember they find all of these cartridges, and there's a big party and a big celebration. But the sort of what we learn on Side Door kind of expands on that story a little bit.
E.T. commits the ultimate video game sin, to disorient the user. And you have to understand the difference between frustration and disorientation, right? Frustration in a video game is essential, right? A video game must frustrate a user, but you should never disorient them.
Howard says that frustration ultimately creates satisfaction. It's a huge motivator in a good game to get better, faster, stronger. Disorientation, on the other hand, is just...
I'm in a pit. I fell in another pit.
Terrible.
God, I love this point because I just 2 nights ago rented Tenet, and I was like, why do I hate this so much? Oh, I'm just disoriented. There's nothing for me to figure out. I just love the clarity of that disorientation versus frustration.
Yeah.
This is probably a good opportunity to mention the sound designer of your pod, because this has some of that beautiful classic 80s sound design to this episode. Who does all that back end stuff? Is that Lizzie?
That's both of us. So that episode, actually, I was thinking back on it this morning, and that episode was one of our earliest. That was the first episode I wrote, but Justin did all the sound, like the scoring for it. So it was a true, complete collaboration there. But ordinarily, moving forward, usually like either one of us will do kind of soup to nuts most of it. Like we are always weighing in editorially, but the episodes that Justin produces, he does the scripting and the sound design and all of that. And the ones that I produce, I do that.
One challenge is sort of to not to make that seamless too, have write in the same voice, produce with the same sort of sense of sound. But we've sort of honed that pretty well over the years. It's also really fun hearing these past episodes. This was like a good episode that I just haven't listened to in forever. And it's kind of funny to hear our old boss, Jason, there weigh in on... he was so excited to play this video game. And then, it all came flooding back, all of the emotions of his childhood around these Atari games.
Afterward, he had like a whole list of other games we should expose as terrible from his childhood.
Just do a whole,
He was like, all right.
do a whole season on your producer's like favorite things. I love it.
Jason's grievances, yeah.
Grievances. That's really good. A whole season of grievances.
Yeah.
I think that's the coolest part of your job is you just get to be like, what am I passionate about? Okay, let's go research this for, 7 days and have you have the top people in the world breaking this stuff down. So cool.
Yeah. It's cool, but I mean, Justin can attest to this too. I think also it's almost a little paralyzing. It's like there's so many options. So we kind of come at stories from two ways. One is, Justin sends me an article or I send him something that I saw that's just like a fantastic story we'd never heard. And we're like, all right, let's find a Smithsonian connection because there's gonna be one somewhere. So sometimes it's we search for that connection and then we, find experts. The rest of the time it's, comes from an exhibition that like we would like to feature because it's, been in the works for 8 years and it's finally opening.
But then others, like there's just cool, units that they call them at the Smithsonian. There's like a unit that we haven't been to in a while. So that's kind of what birthed, like I'm thinking of, it dawned on us sort of midsummer last year that we hadn't told any stories from the Folkways, the Smithsonian's record label, in a while.
I kind of can't believe it's just the two of you. Like, I know how much goes into just me sitting here asking questions, and I have, help and a team of people. Like, I can't believe it's just the two of you.
We have an associate producer who helps out with research a lot and that type of thing. And then we also have a few people from the castle, which is the headquarters of the Smithsonian, which also is kind of like, it is a castle, and they call it the castle. And it's their job to make sure, like, Lizzie and I don't spin off the rails.
But mostly it's the two of us scampering around, like figuring out what to do, and then we bring it back to the team and we're like, all good, and they're they'll either they're like, give us the green light.
They're like, don't do that.
They're like, don't do that. That's fine. Okay, go away now.
Yeah.
And then our associate producer is like very, very helpful with her name is Natalie Boyd, and she does like helps us with just cutting tape and research and background stuff.
I want to put a bow on Howard Scott Warshaw. He's also quickly one of my favorite people after listening to your pod. It's a recurring theme on our podcast, the idea of this idea of like how you perceive failure, like sort of time can sort of change your perception of perceived failures. We did podcast Dead Eyes. I don't know if you've listened to it, where actor fired by Tom Hanks a million years ago, but now has this like burgeoning career centered around being fired by Tom Hanks. And I saw a parallel between him and Howard Scott, and how Howard Scott sort of sees the whole experience of his epic E.T. failure.
This is awesome. This is so awesome. Because something that I did, a few thousand lines of code that I had written over 30 years ago, is still generating all this excitement in that moment. I felt a tremendous sense of satisfaction in that I had really created something that meant something to a lot of people. And that meant something to me.
I think this is where, I think this is the success of your pod for me. You put heart, on all of these objects. You put a human element to the exhibits behind the glass. And I think that's just that's where it clicks.
Howard actually, I don't know if it comes through in the audio or if I just know this from being there, but he actually got kind of choked up at that point. Like he teared up, and he now works as a therapist.
Wow.
For he is a licensed clinical therapist and he mostly works with tech people. So
what element of that story, of that incident, led the Smithsonian to be like, yeah, ET cartridge, gotta have it?
It was actually it was a collections manager. I believe that's his title. Drew Rabarge. Yeah, he worked, he doesn't even usually acquisition things, but young guy, Drew Rabarge, works at the National Museum of American History, and he is just this avid gamer, and he heard about that they were excavating these games, and so he was like, the museum I'm going to lobby for this because they're not going to regret having this cartridge. So it was just one guy who worked there was cool. Like, we need this. Yeah. And then Arthur Demrich of the Lemelson Center really helps to flesh out why that is why that cartridge tells a bigger story.
Is there any ceremony to like what happens when something doesn't age well? You know, when you're collecting all this stuff, you get 30 years down the line, someone must be like, Teletubbies, it didn't age well. I guess we don't really need this original Teletubby, or like, I don't know, whatever the thing is. Like, I just throw that out. Is there just a Smithsonian trash can, or where like
a giant one?
It turns out this isn't a thing. We don't care about Beanie Babies.
I don't think there is, because like, I mean, there's just so much in the collections that may never actually be put on display, but it's still there, you know, because the idea is having lots of raw materials to work with. At any given moment, like the percentage of the Smithsonian's collections that's on display or in an exhibition is like, I don't know, Justin, what, like 2%?
A fraction of a percent.
Yeah, a fraction of a percent.
Wow. So
I bet you there's a Teletubby.
I'm sure.
There's
a whole Muppet closet.
Yeah.
Because what some person saw as important in 1985, like, I'm just thinking if the Smithsonian is a little low on funds because of this COVID thing, we have a little Smithsonian yard sale. We clean out the basement, get rid of some of those old meaningless artifacts. Well, it's fun learning about Howard Scott and the gaming experience. We are gamers. We are avid gamers here at the Pod Spotter. We like our games, and one of our favorite is a little segment we like to call How Well Do You Know Your Pod? I'm going to give you 3 questions about your podcast, and you can work together, Lizzie and Justin. Teamwork to get your pod swag on the pod wall behind me. This beautiful side door koozie we have. We'd like to add that to our wall. 3 questions. How well do you know your pod? Are you ready?
Ready. Justin's not ready, but I'm ready.
He looks ready. That is he's at 10% enthusiasm, which is peak Justin right now. I'm peak Justin enthusiasm. In your Wonder Woman episode, what was the recommended reduction of images of bondage to quell the growing...
I talk about this all the time.
He's got it.
30 to 70%.
Let me get the question out. My goodness. Should have known you'd crush the bondage question.
I'm enthusiastic about this one. Keep going. I'll let you ask the question. What is 30 to 70%?
What is the recommended reduction of images of bondage to quell the growing unwanted attention from certain male readers when the original Wonder Woman came out?
I think it was...
I don't remember.
You don't?
No, I'm kidding.
Oh, okay.
I still give this as editorial feedback to Lizzie on her scripts and stuff. Like, we need 30 to 70% less of this thing.
Lizzie, do you have a guess?
I think it's 60 to 75%.
Okay, let's have a listen.
So the editor really had to do something and clearly wrote, please reduce the mention and showing of change 60 to 75%.
75% reduction in chains in the Wonder Woman comic.
That was the prescription by the editor.
Damn, good Lizzie. I thought it was like...
She crushed it.
I thought it was way broader than that. I thought it was like... Anyway.
Yeah, she crashed it.
She even
repeated it. She had to get it right. She repeated it.
Yeah. Long ago. I had the muscle memory in my mouth of having said it, so that's why it came back. Yeah.
Lizzie, would you tee up that story, because I found that fascinating?
Oh, the 60 to 75. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a story. I mean, we started out wanting to do a Wonder Woman story because the second Wonder Woman was filmed at the Smithsonian. We were like, oh, special access, great. It turned out like Warner Brothers was like, no, just run along now.
Yeah.
So it wound up being a more of a historical tale of the origins of Wonder Woman. And in that particular segment, the creator of Wonder Woman, William Moulton Marston, he was an unusual man and with many interests and proclivities. And he was an ardent feminist by his own definition, and believed that the world would be better ruled by women. But he also was really into like bondage and wrote certain plot devices into the Wonder Woman character. Like there was this conceit that the only way she could lose her superhuman strength is if she was bound in chains by a man. And so basically in every strip, there's Wonder Woman getting tied up by. So there's a lot of sort of like BDSM adjacent imagery. Not even adjacent. There's just a lot of imagery.
Yeah.
And so, because this was a comic for children, and this was the 40s, a lot of people objected. So the editor caught some heat from it, and so mandated this. Actually, that mandate from the powers that be, I think it was his editor, came after a letter came from a U.S. soldier, I believe, who was like, listen, I see what you're doing. I feel so seen.
Oh, yeah.
Wonder Woman is reading like none other I've been able to find in other, places. And if you're like me and the thought of a beautiful woman bound in chains, like and it was just sort of like confirmation of what everyone else had
them.
like. He was like, thank you so much. Like, this is what I've always been searching for because this is what I'm into. And they were like, well,
we got to change it.
Yeah.
That's a wild episode. That's a Wonder Woman episode. Season 5. Definitely check out that one. That's a good place to start. It's a good representation of what you guys do so well in your pod. You've got the first one correct. Congratulations. Just one more.
Lizzie got the first one correct.
You were so sure. You were so sure.
Well, that's never stopped me in the past.
I will not comment.
It's he was 30 to 75% correct. That's
fair.
Let's moving on. Number 2, in Birds, we learn that I love these percentage questions. In Birds, we learn that 57% of birds in North America are on the decline. Which is one way. What is one way that we can help bring those baby birds back? 57% of birds in North America are on the decline, but there is a prescription. The person you interview says there's a way that we can help. What is one way that we can help? Yeah, what's one way we can help bring the birds back?
Lizzie, I'm going to consult you on this one. I remember. Zach, earmuffs, please. This is not our official answer, but this is us talking it through like good teammates that we are. I remember one of the things being plant native, like foliage, brush and trees and whatnot. Oh, I'm also
that was the Monarch episode, though. Oh, sorry. What were you going to say?
I was also remembering don't put your cats outside. That's definitely one of them.
How can you help bring them back?
I'm fine with those as answers because those are answers, but I don't remember what Pete said.
Keep your cats indoors.
I was just emailing with Pete the other day.
Keep your cats indoors.
Pete's coming back.
And I remember like where it came in the episode at the very end, right? The
Justin,
birds.
why don't you restate the first thing you said? Your initial impulse.
My initial impulse was like planting native like bushes and trees and whatever like grows in your area naturally, I think is one of the things because like, as the birds move through there, they're going to want like the berries or whatever grows on the tree.
Let's have a listen.
We just had a series of papers published. It was focused on chickadees, and what we showed was that yards that are dominated by non-native plants produce very few insects, and the species like chickadees that breed in those areas produce very few young because they just can't find the food to feed those young. Chickadees really feed on young like moth and butterfly larvae that emerge from those plants. But the good news there is that if we replant those areas with native plants, then you provide really, really good habitats for chickadees.
Bingo.
Nice, Justin.
Can you include the part where Lizzie was telling me I was wrong?
I think to offset 30 to 75%, I have to. It's beautiful. I love the relationship between you two. It's good. Can I just say, okay, terrifying. We learned in this episode 3 billion birds we've lost in the last 50 years. So super important, I think, to get out there from this gentleman, the fact that if you just populate your garden with native things, that provides a better culture and bugs and things that local birds need, and that'll help bring these little babies back. But I mean, I was just sort of terrified by some of those numbers.
That episode truly like changed the way I see birds.
Totally.
Oh, me too. Yesterday, I saw a red-winged blackbird, and I heard Pete Mara in my head say, red-winged blackbird. It's like, and now I know, like, they're migratory, they're just arriving now. Like, yeah.
Birds actually is my favorite episode. That human, the Birdman, is maybe the best person at his job that I've ever heard of anyone. He's giving you, like, you guys are having this interview, and he's like, "Yeah, birds are on the decline." Oh, sparrow, red-breasted sparrow, right over there. So anyway, the world's gonna end, and muskrats, 2 muskrats, right by your head, Lizzie. Like, he's like compulsive. It's like so awesome.
Yes.
Guys, start
So
with
tuned in.
birds on Smithsonian Sidedoor. You gotta hear this guy. He's so locked in,
and he's a good storyteller, funny guy. Like I really enjoyed going to like watch birds with him.
And this was right at the start of quarantine too. So like
This was exactly a year ago, like this
episode
week. That's a
we
great
did.
point. Oh my gosh.
Justin actually taped the shotgun mic to his hockey stick. He's Canadian and a hockey player. So he taped the microphone to his hockey stick, and we interviewed Pete Mara from like a 6-foot distance via hockey stick microphone.
We showed up to the park and he was just like, "We're going birding and you guys didn't bring binoculars." We were like, "We don't have binoculars. We're not birders."
Yeah. He was a little disappointed in us.
He talks about the health benefits of it, of just knowing, just watching these things in their habitat. Loved birds.
The one last thing I'll say is that after that episode, to Justin's point about how it really did change the way that I continue to look around me outside. But for like a month afterward, I noticed every single bird that crossed my path. And because Pete and I had like Pete's number, I would like like direct message him on Twitter or like text him pictures of these totally mundane birds that, and he'd be like, "Yep, that's a turkey vulture." I'm like, "There's this enormous bird on my parents' roof." And it's sort of like, I don't know, like texting the president when you like a question about the Constitution or something. It's like, I feel like an article is just like, there are a million other people who could answer this question for you, and I do not have time. He was very nice though.
Let's get a clean sweep here. In Field Trip, Justin likens the tarantula on his hand to feeling like what, Lizzie?
Me?
Yes.
He held the tarantula.
He said the words.
He said it feels heavy and hot. It feels warm and it tickles a little. It feels like...
I remember it being very surprised at how warm it was. Like a hand on my hand.
It's like a hand on your hand. Yeah. Felt like a soft hand on your hand. Justin is holding out his hand.
Should I put my hand over there?
Oh my God, Justin. What does it feel like?
It feels like a very soft hand just sort of laying on my hand. She's just kind of sitting there as if she's not sure either what's going on. I guess, is it because my hand isn't quite perfectly still?
So they don't move much when they feel comfortable. So if they feel safe and not like threatened or anything, they'll stay still because they don't want to waste energy.
So what Chris is trying to say is that she likes you.
She likes me. I like her too.
She likes you, Justin.
Clean sweep, 3 out of 3. Guys, you were separated by the first 2 questions, but then came together to help each other to find that final question.
bosses.
This is why we need each other.
This is good stuff. This is good stuff.
I remember they were telling us that if you drop the tarantula, like there's a fluid sac inside the body. Like basically they have no skeleton.
They're mush. Yeah.
And basically if you drop the spider, it would explode and die. And so I was so afraid to hold it because you know that like impulse you get to pull your hand away when something like tingles on it. I just didn't think I could.
Oh yeah, like standing next to a ledge, sort of like, am I going to jump right now? Maybe that's just me.
Like I felt that too. I don't know if it was. It wasn't more like I could drop this spider and kill it. It was more just that, like, it's like something hot touches you and you pull away.
How is exploding spider not in the podcast? That should not have made the editing room floor. That's a crazy fact.
We had to cut so much. That episode was like 45 minutes long, and the aforementioned Jason was actually mad at us when we like sent it out. He was like, "How could you send a cut this long for us to listen to? Like, this is too long." So there was a lot of cool stuff that got cut from that episode. Yeah.
Let's take a quick break here. We'll be right back. Well, you wouldn't buy a car without driving it or go on a date or two before marrying someone. So why not join me every Monday and sample a podcast or two before you make it all official and add it to your library? Commitment free, no strings attached, just you, me, and the host of an exciting new podcast. If you haven't already, please follow us, review us on iTunes, check out our fancy website at thepodspotter.com, and tell fellow lovers of pods what we're doing here. We're playing the field. We're listening to everything. We are podcast amorous. Sorry. Well, let's assume we've finished lunch at the museum. We're a little full. We're kind of walking around,
Kind of
unable
sleepy.
to concentrate, a little sleepy. And we find ourselves standing next to a spacesuit worn by one Neil Armstrong. What is the side door story of the spacesuit in front of me?
Oh, I love this story. That is the secret feminist history of the Apollo walking spacesuit, which was not only made from materials that were invented for women's underwear, but also was assembled by skilled seamstresses who learned their craft largely in the home, like darning socks and things. So that was a really fun story about how the International Latex Corporation, where Playtex got this contract to make the Apollo spacesuit, and then how they pulled it off.
Yeah, super fun learning. Like there was this 3-company competition. Like this company wasn't even supposed to be there. And it's just who can design the best spacesuit.
The spacesuits competed in 22 different challenges. They received scores based on criteria like size, weight, mobility, visibility, temperature, and how tired the testers got while wearing them. The contest started out bumpy for ILC when a zipper on the suit failed. The team had 12 tense hours to charter a plane and fly it back to Delaware for emergency repairs. But Hamilton Standard and David Clark had their own problems, big ones. During one test, the helmet of the David Clark suit blew clear off, and the shoulders of the Hamilton Standard suit expanded so far under air pressure that when the test subject tried to enter the lunar lander,
they just couldn't get in the door. And it's very funny if you can imagine them just sort of butting themselves in and trying to get into the door, but then you imagine it on the surface of the moon and it's suddenly not so funny anymore.
So we learned that there is this competition, and the company ILC, our hero company, has brought along with them seamstresses.
The biggest challenge was, creating a spacesuit that was flexible and comfortable while pressurized. And so what Playtex was able to do was create this material called convolute using what even
I
is
can't believe you remember that.
Latex.
Yeah.
Using latex. I remember it because I lobbied so hard to keep the word convolute in, and everyone was like, we don't need the technical term. And I'm like, no, it's a new material. It's called, and it basically worked like the plastic bend in a straw. It had those sort of ridges. So they used like nylon that's like mesh nylon for like bra cups and for straps, and then the latex for the girdles. And basically it gave structure to this nylon, like accordion kind of joints.
Right.
So they needed also to attach those things to fabric, which is kind of how bras are made as well. And so they had seamstresses who were adept at sewing women's lingerie, and they were able to sew the spacesuits as well.
The most skilled, the most talented craftswomen who worked for the larger company of ILC, they brought this knowledge that was not present anywhere else in this larger military-industrial mixture into the suit-making process.
And what did the seamstresses know that the engineers didn't?
Everything.
The engineers would come up with designs, but the thing was they couldn't sew.
This is Jean Wilson.
I've been told that I'm one of a kind.
This is perfect side door material. You see the iconic suit. You're walking through the museum. You know it. You know the story, the thing, and the small step for blah, blah, blah. But this, you don't, it's underreported. And the sort of contribution of seamstresses of these adept seamstresses. I just love that.
Yeah, and also the fact that like they were so ILC, like the underdog of the story, that they had to break into their own offices in order to make like their suit contribution. Like they had to basically demand to be entered in the contest, and then Hamilton Standard had like left and locked all the doors behind them, and they had to like actually crawl through air ducts to break into their own warehouses to get the materials to make their suit. It's made for a movie.
It just was almost unbelievable. It just was almost too much to comprehend.
To see Neil Armstrong on the moon, and at the same time, what he's wearing, you helped to make. A lot of us cried.
But yes, I watched it, and I was hoping that nothing went wrong.
I learned like so many new jobs exist from your pod. Like there's an there's like a smell scientist, the smell expert. What was like the weirdest or most fascinating like occupation you didn't know was an occupation?
I think that one for me was like, who would have known that there was like a person who travels the world, like collects things, brings them back to her lab, and like distills their smell into like it cracks open her vials of potions and like distill and like recreates the smells. It's wild.
She has like a smell slurper. It's like a little vacuum that she takes out, and she'll just like and then bottle it and then like analyze it.
And that's not an interactive exhibit, is it?
Well, that's actually not a Smithsonian person. That's
okay.
She's an artist. She doesn't work for the Smithsonian, but she collaborated.
We went to New York to the Cooper Hewitt, the Smithsonian's Design Museum, and they had like a temporary exhibition in there, and we did the smelling of this. Like they recreated the smell of an extinct plant.
This episode smells. Yeah.
This episode smells. Was it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We talked to 20,000 Hertz, the podcast, and their whole initiative is to just like refine people's hearing. And I feel like smell should have a little representation at the Smithsonian. There are unique and interesting and specific smells.
And smells are under.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, champion smells. I like this hot take.
Well, okay, two things come to mind. One is that like the smell center in your brain is right next to like the memory center. So to your point, that is what they're very evocative. So if, history is part of this, Smithsonian's collections, why not smells too that bring it up? But also that smell, I think, is the least valued of the five senses. And there's the least amount of research and funding for research based on smell. But I think because of COVID, that is changing because people are really feeling loss of smell in a big way, like how much it affects your life. Awesome. And so I think that people having lost their sense of smell is actually going to provoke more research into smell. And maybe you will get what you want, Zach.
Yeah, I like it. We need more smellologists out there, darn it. Any upcoming exhibits that you can't wait to feature or can't wait to dive into? We learned on one of our episodes about like the Warren G. Harding letters that were like sealed in a museum for a certain amount of time and like till like X amount of years till the estate was like, okay, now you can release them. Now you can read the Warren G. Harding, sex tapes basically. And is there anything like that that's like off limits, taboo, or you can't right now, but you will potentially?
Well, there's a big Futures exhibition coming up.
Okay.
That opens in August, and that is to celebrate 175 years of the Smithsonian.
Nice.
And so we will probably be featuring the Futures exhibition at the end of this season.
And what you have just stuff from the future in that?
If I told you, I would have to destroy this tape.
Okay, fair enough.
One of the challenges, though, of our stories is sometimes like we know we want to do an episode about a thing, or like, we know we will very likely tell a story about this Futures exhibition or featured in the Futures exhibition. But until we are 2 months out and we kind of start the story and the research process, like we don't know what that thing necessarily will be. So it's also like that question's sort of impossible to answer because we aren't there yet.
Got it. Guys, is there anything about your pod that you prepared an answer for that you wish I asked about?
I'm flattered you think we prepared.
The wardrobe in the background should have given it away. Really should have.
This is just where the microphone lives.
Sounds
this is
great.
the most soundproof place.
Sounds great. That's really all that matters.
Exactly. Usually people can't see me in here, so.
Well, no trip to the museum would be complete without soliciting for donations. So how can folks help the Smithsonian in this time of need right now when no one is really visiting? Where can they donate?
They can tweet about how much they like Sidedoor.
There you go.
I mean, if they want to give money, we do have, I think it's sidedoor.edu/contribute. Just listen and subscribe and spread the word about Sidedoor.
Lovely.
Tweet about us, if, as Justin says.
It's a museum podcast. I forgot to ask. I should ask. Have either of you ever slept over at the museum?
No.
Let's not talk about it.
No. Okay.
No, it's a sore subject.
Oh, okay. Uh-oh.
I really want to sleep over at the museum.
You gotta see what happens. Is this real? Do you really? Have you asked? You got to, right?
Yeah, this is one of the episodes that I wanted to make, and Justin was like, 100%, "We're not doing that."
100%, Justin. The overnight at that's what we want.
I think it's that Justin didn't want to be overnight with me at a museum.
Got it. Okay.
And
Get
also,
Birdman, Lizzie. Get Birdman in there. You guys just.
Well, I was just gonna say, what's the story there? There's nothing. Like 2 a.m. Still here. Stuff's still here. Nothing's alive. Taking a nap.
But see, I was envisioning us like creeping around and like.
It's a debunk. You're debunking. It's a debunking episode.
Right.
Debunk
Will things come alive?
Debunk the popular Ben Stiller theory that Robin
How do you
Williams,
do that for 30 minutes?
You just do it. You put up a
Shortest
crazy title.
episode.
I think
Nothing's alive.
We want it.
We do want it, and I think. I think also it taps into like. Ye of little faith, Justin.
Yeah.
Things happen when you can't know what's going to happen. You just have to trust that things will happen.
Exploding tarantulas. There's a world of possibilities at the sleepover.
Sleep, Zach. Sleep is precious.
Sleep is precious.
Parent of a tiny person.
I would do anything in my power to just get a night away. I would be planning every sleepover episode right now if I were you, just to, get off.
That's actually a very good point. You're like, sorry.
Justin's like, actually, this is a great idea. Open the Smithsonian.
You've swayed me.
Well, it's the last 5 minutes of our podcast, which means no one is here. No one is listening anymore. Everyone has left. They finished cooking or jogging or doing whatever it was that they were doing. And so it's just us, no one else. They've left. They've closed the side door. And so it's really just our time. And I'd like to go first. And I think I'll just talk about, I want to talk about, I guess, a museum-related time that it was 6th grade. And we went to Natural History Museum. And I remember standing in front of an exhibit. I don't even remember what it was, but it was a piece of history. And maybe it was like, I don't know, the caveman thing or something. And I remember, as an actor, I would always try to make myself get teary, as a kid. I would try to, just see if I can access that. And I remember thinking, if my teacher sees me getting emotional at this exhibit, like, maybe I'll get some extra credit. Maybe she'll, take it, go a little easy on me in social studies or something. She'll think like, oh man, I affected some change today. I did some good because I got through to Zach. He saw the caveman or the whatever the hell the thing was, and he was emotional. And so I just like stood there, just like staring at these cavemen, like trying to fume up all of this emotion. And it was like the moment she was coming, and I was like, if I could just, and she's like walking by, and I couldn't execute. I couldn't perform in the moment. And I know the actor's nightmare. I couldn't access it. I couldn't feel it. And she was just like, let's go. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. We'll get out of here. And the moment was a nothing, but I used to, that's the disingenuous person that I was and probably still am, that it was more about the theater of it. Yeah. Psychopath. That's a better.
Oh man. That's that is a very, that kind of childhood memory where you're so emotionally invested, you want something so bad, and then it doesn't have, you can see all the things that are going to play out if you can just pull it off. Yeah. It's a great story.
My goodness. Is it this exhibit? Has it affected you?
Yeah.
Okay. It's so beautiful. No, I don't know what. I don't know how that plays out.
The sensitive child.
Yeah.
And,
I don't know. How, play that out. She sees me because she's like, "Oh, you miss home? Let's go. We'll get."
Are you tired?
You tired?
Nap time.
Whatever, guys. Whatever. You know.
I'm surprised Justin hasn't started talking about Sesame Street already.
Let's go. I can talk some Sassy.
Usually
That's
when
called
there's
Sassy
a
in these
lull,
parts.
a lull in conversation.
My 15-month-old calls it Sassy. I could talk some Sassy.
My 14-month-old, she's very invested in. Thank you. Yeah, you as well. Very invested in Elmo. And the other day, actually, I was. Sesame Street's a fascinating show. Don't get me started, Lizzie. But
I did for this reason.
Yeah, I did for this reason.
You're their biggest hype man.
Well, I think there's a lot of there must be I mean, that's not even the most interesting part. I have a dumb story about Sesame Street. So the other day we're teaching, my daughter, the body parts, head, tongue. She knows she's got that one on lock. You just walk into a room called tongue and she's like, that.
Got it.
But I was teaching her elbow, and then she was like, "Oh yes, I know this one, Elmo." And I said, "No, elbow." And she said, "Elmo." So now she calls her elbow her Elmo, which is kind of funny.
We deliberately got our daughter a Grover doll just to try to push away from the Elmo, because they really push that Elmo as the front man.
Big Elmo's a thing. Grover, I find him his character is. He's so annoying. I'm not a grovologist. I'm also I hear what you're saying about Elmo though.
They're just pushing him too much. He opens it. He gets his own segment. He's got 2 segments. It's too much, Elmo. Guys, bring Elmo down a little bit. Elmologist is or is not a Smithsonian job, by the way.
Additionally, Justin has it. He added it to his card.
There has to be. There probably is an Elmo at the Smithsonian, right? 100%.
I think we've
seen him. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's in the vault.
Any side door info on the anything you can tell us about Elmo? He's really not a puppet. It's real.
He's alive.
Lizzie, anything for the last 5 minutes?
The thing that I want to gripe about is my recent trip to the DMV, which I thought might be something that was in at least marginally functional experience for the first time because it's by appointment only. So my license was going to expire on my birthday.
Right.
So this is very out of character. I scheduled an appointment 3 months in advance because you have to in order to be seen before it expires. And so I had the appointment last week and I went and got there 8:30 in the morning. So before, and I had to deliver a script that day. So I was in last days of writing this script. So 8:30 appointment, go. I actually got there on time. I waited till the appropriate time in my car until it was time to go get in line. I followed all the rules. I brought 1,000,001 documents that I did not need just in case. And then I was the next person in line. And this announcement comes on. There's a statewide outage in processing driver transactions. And so the system's down statewide and they don't know when it's going to be up. And so they apologize for any inconvenience. And so it was 8:35. So I was like, I'll wait till 9. So I waited until 9 and I was like, I'll wait till 9:30. And I waited till 9:30 and I was like, I'll hang in there until 10 because I knew if I left, I wouldn't be able to get an appointment until well after my license had lapsed. And I'm also trying to get married and I have to get a marriage license. There's this the domino thing, right? So I ended up waiting until 10:04, at which point I had the coffee headache and I had just gotten out of bed, thrown on a hat, was I gotta, this'll be in and out. So I walk up to the thing, they come back online, 10:04. I walk up to the thing. He's like, great, sign the thing. Where's your document? Awesome. You passed the eye test. All right, line up over there for the picture. And I was like, oh, I selected to just use my old picture. And he's like, oh, you can only do that if you renew online. And I was like, well, I tried to renew online and they wouldn't let me. And he's like, yeah, you can't renew online. And I was like, well, okay. So I took off my hat, which I had put on because I hadn't washed my hair. And I had been sweating inside the DMV for an hour and a half. And I had this big fever blister. And anyway, so I line up against the wall and then the shutter, looking at the camera, the shutter clicks. And so then I step forward and then the flash goes on. And the guy was like, can I see that picture? And he's like, no, ma'am, that'll be $42. We'll mail you your license. It expires in 2029. I was like, what just happened? Oh, no. So now I think I might change my name when I get married so that I can get a new driver's license. Because I don't know what it's going to look like, but it's not going to be good.
I have a few follow-ups. Is the photo readily available?
No.
Come on.
Still in the mail.
Okay.
I haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
It's probably worse in my mind than it is in
Can we put it on our socials?
Definitely not. 100% not.
I think I'm going above you on this one, Lizzie. I think I'm going kind of above you. Just because we like to verify. We like to fact check and verify. Can I also say, I think it's brilliant, and I've had a gripe about this for years. I think it's brilliant to sort of look horrible in these photos that last forever. You said a wedding coming up. I often encourage people before weddings, just make yourself gain a bunch of weight, make yourself look terrible. I got real sunburn for mine. So that way you look back on that day and you're like, well, at least I look better now than I did that day. As opposed to looking amazing for one day and then the rest of your life you're like, man, I wish I had that body. So I just overate and I really just went all out and looked like garbage. And I think I'm pretty happy with the results because when I look at my wedding photo, I'm like, okay, look better than that for the rest of my life. I get that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So you'll be able to look at this, DMV photo and be like, well, at least I'm not having that day.
It's also a good.
It's true. I'll look at it and be like, that was the last time I was healthy when I got COVID at the DMV.
Oh,
it's the last picture of her in decent health. Sorry, Justin, you were saying something.
That's also a way to like encourage spousal satisfaction, right? Because like they also look back at those photos and they'll be like, holy shit, against all odds. Justin's better today than he was then.
Yeah, see? Anyone have anything for the Podcast Hall of Fame before we go to take us out? I like to end on something that, a piece of audio that you would like inducted into the Smithsonian. When the Smithsonian gets the podcast wing, something from your pod, anything like a little soundbite, a song, any quote that would, as customers come into the museum, they come to the exhibit of Sidedoor and they press the little red button at the Smithsonian and this sound plays.
I actually do have an answer for this one. Well, it's a piece of audio that I think of fairly often, just because it made me laugh. And so in the Birds episode, Pete Mara, our the Birdman, he was like spotting everything that day, and then we were in the middle of a conversation, and then he goes, see something like over Lizzie's shoulder, and he's like, oh, it's a duck or something, and then he squints, and then he's like, nope, it's a piece of trash. And it was like so it was so in character because it was like so earnest. I saw like a very average bird that he was like totally excited about, but then it also felt like a commentary on the world we live in because it wasn't like an abundant kind of average bird that you can see everywhere. It was a piece of garbage, and it like he kind of briefly was so deflated after it, but then he kind of just moved on with his life.
Is that did that make the episode?
I think if I remember correctly,
I don't remember.
That as,
I studied that episode pretty hard.
Oh, it was the
credits.
outtake.
It was
the
kicker.
outtake.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm your host, Lizzie Peabody. Thanks for listening.
There's a shorebird right there. Oh, nope. It's a piece of garbage. Shoot.
We're always looking for new suggestions on a fresh batch of pods. Please tell me what you're listening to and what hosts you'd like to hear from via thepodspotter.com or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram at thepodspotter. Thank you. This has been Zach Robinos. The Podspotter is created by the Price Brothers, produced by Oink Inc. Radio, associate producer Tori Adams, and is recorded and produced at Baker Sound in Philadelphia.